All right, let's jump right into this explainer. If you spend your time building quantitative market models, you know the drill. You're constantly trying to extract signal from noise, and you probably rely heavily on traditional open, high, low, close, or OHLC price data. But what if the very architecture of your model has a fatal blind spot? What if the data you're obsessing over is literally just the footprint, and you are completely missing the creature that left it? Today, we're exploring a fascinating institutional proposal, the SRBMPR Manifesto. Our mission here is to expose the critical limits in traditional price prediction models and unpack a framework designed to measure the invisible behavioral paradigm that actually drives the market.
And it all starts with this core axiom. Behavior gives birth to the candle, not the other way around. I really want to emphasize this because it sets up a massive philosophical shift. You see, traditional models focus on the visible result, right? The final printed candle. But this framework insists that every visible candle is preceded by an invisible process of participant decisions, pressure, and accumulation. If you ignore that invisible cause, your hypotheses are always going to be underspecified.
So here is the roadmap for our explainer today. We'll contrast visible price with invisible behavior, define what SRBPR actually is, break down the zero cycle, walk through the 7-stage pipeline, look at the Python protocol, and wrap up with research integrity.
Let's start with part 1, visible price versus invisible behavior, and the limits of traditional models.
To understand why traditional quantitative models hit a brick wall, we really have to look at the two paradigms. Traditional AI models obsess over the visible footprint, the OHLC data, the final volume records. But those are just the final records of a move that has already happened. SRBMPR, on the other hand, is built to reconstruct the invisible behavioral sequence. It zeroes in on the origin points. We're talking about the actual participant decisions that occurred before the candle even closed. By relying solely on final market outputs, traditional models end up with incredibly inconsistent results, just because they lack the context of what participants were actually doing inside the move.
Moving to part 2, defining the SRBMPR framework as a behavioral measurement tool. Let's establish exactly what this framework is, and more importantly, what it isn't. I want to dismantle a common myth right out of the gate. This is not a predictive trading signal system. SRBMR stands for Structural Risk-Based Move Progression Ratio. It's a strict measurement framework tracking the ratio of successive structural legs inside completed market cycles. The manifesto itself provides the exact definition and is backed by a core statistics table drawn from a massive 5,536 cycle dataset. Ultimately, this structural measurement is how you objectively dictate stop-loss and target levels.
The mathematical anchor for this entire system is strict normalization. The very first structural leg in any measured sequence, which is known as R0, is always strictly normalized to 1.00. Every subsequent move, progression, and risk ratio in the sequence is measured relative to this foundational 1.00 anchor. This is absolutely crucial because it's what allows the framework to compare vastly different market cycles on a true apples-to-apples behavioral basis.
Part 3, decoding the zero cycle, the engine room.
To understand how that 1.0 anchor is born, we have to look into the scientific construct of the framework. The zero cycle is the foundational research unit. Think of it as the invisible seed of a behavioral sequence. It's detected using strict quantitative merge point logic, a fractal swing high and low that forms within 8 bars or less, featuring a price tolerance of 0.15% or less. This is the structural engine room that carries the genetic code for the entire sequence's future expansion. But listen, the data generated here is only zero cycle, zero behavior data. It's just the first sample. There are actually 5 more behavior types left in the methodology. Let's look at part 4. The 7-stage analysis pipeline, from raw data to AI.
This is a non-destructive dynamic pipeline that translates raw, invisible market activity into structured intelligence. It kicks off with raw data validation. Then it moves to rhythm detection, identifying timing sequences and structural relationships. Step 3 is context reconstruction, evaluating the move against prior structure and its market location. And this perfectly sets the stage for step 4, behavior measurement. This logical flow ensures that before we even attempt to measure behavior, we completely understand the structural rhythm and the context it's occurring in.
Building on that context, step 5 is the precise zero-cycle extraction we just talked about, isolating those atomic units of higher lows and lower highs. Step 6 compiles this into a pristine, bias-free dataset. Finally, step 7 feeds this structured, contextualized behavioral data into AI models.
So, instead of feeding an AI blind OHLC prices, you're giving it true understanding through measured underlying behavioral sequences. To ground this theoretical pipeline in reality, take a look at this raw Bitcoin gap data across 10-minute time frames. Notice the missing underscore count column? When there are data gaps, this framework strictly records the missing periods as a count. It literally never invents candles. Zero interpolation is applied to smooth things over. This absolute devotion to unmodified data is exactly what makes the behavioral measurement so pristine.
Section 5, the Python Measurement Protocol, which is both educational and highly transferable.
So how do we actually execute this methodology objectively? Well, the Manifesto provides a clean, transferable Python measurement protocol. And here's the best part, it explicitly avoids hard-coding magical numbers or secret indicator settings. Instead, it focuses purely on generic structural leg detection. Using a simple swing lookback of 5, it measures the absolute price move and extracts the direction. Because it only measures and doesn't predict, anyone can run this codebase on any OHLC data to extract the raw structural legs for themselves.
Now, this brings us to a massive general rule that anyone using this framework absolutely must follow. Behavior is not universal. If you take the exact same candle body but start your structural measurement from a different zone, say mid-cycle or late in a different market regime, the internal connection changes. The sequence of legs changes. The risk-reward ratios change. You can never treat a single zero-cycle sample as universal truth. If you make that mistake, the whole methodology collapses. You must always ask the owner of the data first which behavior type or cycle zone is actually being measured.
Which leads us to our final section, Part 6, Research Integrity and Validation, Descriptive, Not Predictive.
Let's cement the institutional weight of this manifesto. As we've said, SRBMPR is a measurement process, not a predictive trading signal system. The core tenet is that behavior changes first and candle structure changes later. The manifesto also outlines a step-by-step backtest and survey protocol, along with 6 core principles. And here is a critical point on research integrity. Do you need to hand your behavior data over to someone else? Actually, no. You only need a third party if you want independent, institutional-style replication. For private or proprietary use, it is much cleaner to keep your measurement, backtest, and live journal under one controlled process.
The framework strictly separates the data into left behavior, meaning the historical context and the current decision point, and right reaction, which is the future outcome. Without rigorously validating the left behavior first, observing the right reaction means absolutely nothing. If the required structural sequence isn't detected on the left, there's no trade, no prediction, and definitely no forced pattern. It is pure behavior validation.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought. We've seen that traditional models chase the visible footprints of OHLC data, while the actual market engine runs on invisible behavioral cycles. If behavior truly precedes price, and your current AI or quantitative model is only analyzing the final candle structure, what invisible cycles is your model completely missing? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the SRBMPR Manifesto. Keep questioning the architecture of your data.